Stop trying to create a pretty sound. Stop trying to create a sound in general. Now, don't misunderstand. When we sing, obviously we want a pleasant sound. We want a sound that's attractive, especially if we're singing out in public. But if we are constantly striving to create and manipulate our sound so that it's quote unquote pretty, you will never really reach your full potential. It will also not really be your honest, true sound. And to be honest, it probably won't be very operatic. Operatic singing, classical singing, at its core, is visceral, is animalistic, it's primal, especially for male voices. Think about the human version of a lion roaring, a gorilla grunting, a wolf's howl. It's the equivalent of that visceralness. For the sound to be resonant, voluminous, full of rich depth, the mechanism for that type of phonation requires a sense of release, loss of control, if you will, not creating a sound. If you create a sound, it's all manipulative, it's all done here. We want to be free of this, free of any artificial sound, faking, manipulating. Don't think pretty. Don't think create, think release, think let go, think loss of control. The difference between this sound and this sound is literally nothing. Both sounds are completely released. The first sound, there's certain laryngeal freedom in which the larynx is going up and down, yodeling. The second sound is that same laryngeal freedom, but a little bit more stabilized, more controlled, but still vibrating in its correct position. So I've talked about these two rules of singing. We're gonna do this step by step. This is more of an interactive video to really get you guys starting to think a little bit more simple, to get you guys out of here and more into the body. The first rule of singing is opening the pharyngeal space. We've talked about this. This can be done in a number of ways. Opening the pharyngeal space does not mean necessarily to think lower the larynx. I believe this to be a mistake, and it's why I try not to say this as much anymore. If you think about lifting your arm, you don't necessarily think flex your bicep. No, that would be silly. You think, I'm gonna lift my arm. Same idea. If we think about lowering the larynx, there's gonna be certain muscular engagement to quote unquote lower that larynx. Usually this leads to a compressed position. I am lowering the larynx. There seems to be an over-obsession with this idea of lowering the larynx, which leads to a lot of throaty singing, artificially dark singing, and singing that is also very much here, strained. Instead of thinking lowering the larynx, we want to think of opening the throat, opening the pharyngeal space, and suspending that posture, that position. That's so much easier and less muscularly engaged than thinking, lowering the larynx. When we open the throat, as a consequence, the larynx will lower and the palate will raise, the soft palate will raise. Just as when we think, I'm lifting my arm, as a consequence, the bicep will be engaged, as well as other muscles. So don't overthink and over-obsess about this idea of compressing the larynx downwards. Now, we can open this pharyngeal space, this open throat position, in a number of ways. We can think about this yawn, which has been taught very, very much. We usually can relate to this one very well, which is the reason why it's being taught so much. Because when we yawn, we do naturally open the pharyngeal space. The larynx lowers, the soft palate raises, and as a consequence, we're sort of left in this yawny speaking voice in which the chords are very loose, quite breathy, lots of head voice in the sound, but we feel a certain amount of space. It definitely feels different than this position, which is my normal speaking position. However, the yawn does have certain negatives. Usually when we yawn, we don't necessarily are conscious of it, but our tongue falls back completely. I'm swallowing my tongue. If you consistently swallow your tongue and you build that habit, this could lead to singing in which the back of the tongue is constantly depressing on the larynx. And you're swallowing that sound. No, no, no. The other negative about the yawn is that I find it to have certain connotations with thinking low. Which again leads to this temptation of swallowing, leads to the idea of darker vowels, which we do not want dark vowels. We want bright vowels in that open throat space. Therefore, I would suggest if you're doing the yawn to achieve this open throat position, really think about yawning with your tongue lifted, especially the back of the tongue lifted up so it doesn't fall back. And don't necessarily think the idea of lowness. No. Another way to think about this pharyngeal space is, if you have a straw, you can think about slurping through that straw, almost through an oo vowel. Ooh, you still get the same feeling of open pharyngeal space. If you don't have a straw, don't sweat it. Think about slurping noodles. Or think about sucking through an oo vowel. Same idea. I have spoken in my previous videos, the laryngeal position should be in this oo valvula. That is correct, this UH or oo vowel posture. It's almost like there's this feeling that the laryngeal position is constantly in this posture of oo. Even when we sing a, e, I, o, it's still through this laryngeal position. We have to separate what's happening here with what's happening here. Another way to think about it is inhaling through a G or a K. So instead of K or G, you inhale that. I find that to be a very, very nice open throat feeling. Why? Because it's almost like a gasp. Maria Callas would always say that this preparation, this inhalation to prepare this onset should be like a breath of surprise, as if someone is surprising you. And this idea of inhaling through this K or inhaling through this G is very similar to that. And what I really love about it is that your tongue tends to not fall back as much. You can also do it through a smile. If you want to think yawning through a smile, that's also correct. I also find it relatively close to where we snore, but not so far forward into the nose. If you think about where a cat hisses, and you think about inhaling the same way, you get that same openness with a lot of height. I've spoken about this too in my snarl videos. Keeping that smile, that boca de conillo, that bunny mouth, in which case it ceases to have that idea or feeling of lowness. But depth and height, keeping it tenorial. Last but not least, which is also a good one, is having the sensation of smelling something delicious. Oh, that feeling of suspending this deep inhalation as well can help to open the throat without necessarily thinking, lowering the larynx. That's the first rule. That's turning on the voice. Now, what is rule 2? And how does this tie into this idea of visceral, released singing? When we inhale through this open throat position, air is now entering our body. The first thing we want to do is expand our intercostals. These are the ribs that wrap around the body. Therefore, you could feel this laterally. A lot of other singers sometimes feel it in their back. That's totally normal. I always have felt it laterally. This lateral expansion. When this is done correctly, the diaphragm is able to descend deeply. As air is now filling our lungs, we can also feel a bit of an inflation in our belly area. That's normal. What I have described is not very difficult. It's actually a normal, deep thoracic breath. Now comes a point where we have finished our inhalation, no air is coming in, and no air is coming out just yet. We're sort of suspended in this position. It lasts about a millisecond just before we're about to sing, and now Here comes the second job of the singer. We need to make an intentional choice, an intentional decision to release pressurized air. Pressurized being the key word. Why? Because we need pressure to allow initiation in vibration of the vocal cords in order to have a resonant, buoyant sound. If we think about it this way, this might help a lot of people who are confused about how much cord closure is too much cord closure, how do I get out of the throat, it's throaty. Don't think about that stuff. For a second, stay with me, don't think about those things. Think about just the air. Initiating a release of pressurized air. Again, we do this naturally when we sneeze, when we cough, when we aspirate in an energized manner, not in a lazy manner. No. Very intense, very visceral, very released. We also do this when we call out to someone. Ha! Ha! When we do those things, the body starts to react. It can't help it. It starts to engage. I've talked about this in my previous videos. This area below the chest, the epigastric region, protrudes. As we release this puff of energized air, it protrudes. Now, do not misunderstand. I am not doing this physically. I am not making a choice to flex my abs, push anything. We're not pushing, flexing anything abdominally. This is something the body does naturally as a consequence of releasing pressurized air. So obviously, when we release puffs of air, it engages for about less than a second, right? When we sing, we want to extend this process that the body reacts to, this process of releasing pressurized air, so that it's not just a puff of air and then we're gone. No, it's a constant stream of pressurized air in which the diaphragm, as we exhale, slowly squeezes the lungs so that air can flow through a narrow opening of the vocal cords. And therefore, we are now a walking oxygen tank with the capability of breath control. So, suspend that. This feeling of protrusion has gone from just 1 second to now leaning and sustaining until we have finished that phrase, or until we have run out of air. Leaning. What's the Italian word for leaning? Appoggio. This is your appoggio. It starts with this release of pressurized air. That's why singing opera is a physical activity. It is not like pop or jazz. Those are all great genres. They're wonderful. But singing opera is not just singing, it's a physical activity. More and more do I tell a lot of my students to try on their own, go out running for 10 to 15 minutes, or do some sort of cardiovascular activity in which by the time you finish, you are gasping. All right, that feeling of inhalation and exhalation is what we need to replicate when we sing opera. It's deep. For this to be relaxed and gentle and easy and feel like we can sing this gigantic resonant sound without feeling anything here, this has to be super active, super engaged. If this is not engaged enough, this has no choice but to step up and make up for the laziness here. And when this starts to make up for it, this is when we start to get into all sorts of trouble. We start to get into singing throaty. It's not no, it's flow of air. This windpipe is a hose and it's connected to your lungs. But instead of water, this hose is flowing air constantly. From the moment we decide to sing and exhale to the moment we no longer have any air in our body. It's energized, it's intense, it's active, it's released. That flow of air needs to go through a narrow opening of the cords. As that is happening, we also have the bottom of our belly, which also reacts. It seemingly does a tuck in and up. That's that engagement in which the diaphragm is slowly ascending, squeezing the lungs, and starting that flow of air. So your appoggio is here, and your breath control is here. The third job of the singer is to simply get out of the way. Stop thinking. That's it. Your job is done. Your job is to create a posture and then let the body flow, release, let go. Let the body take over. You lose control. So let's get visceral. Do this with me. First job, open that throat, making sure that we're not swallowing that tongue. We take that inhalation, that open pharyngeal space, and we intensely, with energize, release our air. We are aspirating with energy. If you have something solid, you can put it right in that area to feel that engagement. In, out, in, out. We're just flowing air at the moment. As we inhale and we exhale, maintaining that open throat position. We're aspirating in and out with energy, thinking we are a primate, an animal. Slowly, that aspiration turns into a sigh. Think gorilla grunting. Visceral, animal, letting the sound go. Forget about all judgments and ideas and preconcepts that you've had about singing. Drop them just for now. Indulge me for a moment. If you want, you can even close your ears. Just to feel that sensation. In, out. In, out. Slowly getting more intense as that sigh is now turning into a moan. Intensing that moan. Releasing more and feeling that this flow of air is constantly moving forward. It's never stagnant. It's not lazy. That's lazy. You're not going to get much reaction. Active. That moan is now starting to lose more and more control as it gets more active, as this airflow gets more and more intense. Think Tarzan. Think Jungle Book. This yodel, this moan while yodeling to give now laryngeal freedom. Complete loss of control, visceralness, animal, almost as if it's coming from the bowels of your body, which in a manner of speaking it is. Now slowly this moan, suspending it longer and longer, and that wild larynx going up and down in this yodel, starting to stabilize into our singing posture so that it is still free and vibrating, but not compressed. It's vibrating in that low position and suspending it into a sound. And allowing all that airflow, that space, to funnel through a bright pure Italian vowel. So that is buoyant, it's loud, it's resonant, visceral. To get to there, you need to go through these steps of releasing the sound. You'll never get there if you're thinking creating a pretty sound. No, that's for you. That's not for the public. Singing opera is the extension of reciting. Resonant, loud, public speaking without a microphone. Make the ugly noises. Go that far. Over exaggerate so you know where the extremes are. Feel these sensations. It's a physical activity. It will become pretty. And not just pretty, it will become thrilling. It'll become exciting. When you hear an opera singer doing it correctly, you're like, holy crap. All that sound is coming from that one person. It sounds like a warrior cry, like you're in a horse, charging in battle. It's an extension of that sound. Letting it go, free, so that it's not here. You could do this for hours and never get tired. And it's resonant, buoyant, loud, free and flexible enough to crescendo and decrescendo. So you can be artistic with it. Do this while moving forward. So you have this mentality that the sound is always moving. It's on the air. It's on the breath. That's why they call it aria. I'm singing an aria. Air. It's all about the air. Nothing to do with creating, manipulating things here. Nothing. At its core, this is opera singing. Primitive. Think caveman. When we're developing the voice, you're going to find out it's not so much about putting layers and layers and layers on top of layers and learning new things, as it is actually taking away bad habits and going back to what we did naturally when we were babies. When babies cry, they do the same exact mechanism. They breathe in thoracically and release a pressurized amount of air until they run out of air. And then they restart the process. And they can do this for hours and hours and hours without getting tired for that same exact reasoning. We want to mimic that exact process. We just do so with an open throat and concentrate that amount of sound into a point, into a focus point, so that it has squealo, brilliance, resonance. It's not saturated one way or another, dark or bright. We want both. Another exercise you can do is calling out with an A-H-A, really aspirating on that H. Aha! Aha! Active. Not aha, aha, aha. That's not active. That's lazy. You're working out. You're running. You're moving. Aha! Ha! You're calling out to someone really far away. It's not here. No. Aspirate through that H so you get that feeling of airflow before the chords are closed. Ha! Do that a couple times. And then the next step to that is 2 ahas, and the last one, sustain into a singing position. Aha! 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 And feel the intention. If you want to move forward while doing this, it's fine too. Aha! So you feel the spin. Try to follow this process. Take it step by step. Really try to loosen up the sound. Stop mimicking, stop forcing, it's not here. It comes from the body. Feel this flow of air. Get in that mentality of animalistic. You're an animal. You cannot take a sound like opera and think that it's similar to the way you speak. It's not. It's full-bodied singing. Healthy, gentle approach, allowing the chords to stretch and thin as we ascend, yes, but energized, active, engaged, supported with the body. Thinking, release of resonant air. As always, these are my findings. These are things that work for me. You are welcome to try it out. I hope it gives you guys good results. That's why I'm here. I just want to help. If it doesn't, if you think it's crazy, no one's forcing you to do it. I wish you all always a good luck on your vocal journeys. With that being said, if you have enjoyed today's videos, like always, subscribe, like the video, and become a member of the CTS community that has special perks and benefits in which I give more advice, more specific advice to those that join and become a member of the channel. And obviously, it helps me to continue creating content for you guys and try to be of help. Keep studying, keep practicing, and as you know, the work always continues. Ciao, ciao for now.